So welcome everyone to the Food for Thought special speaker panel on promoting broader participation of women in peace and security in the Americas, UN Security Council 1325. And we're honored to have our distinguished guest with us today with Colombia SIPA's Picker Center. And thank you all for joining. This session is recorded, and we have our wonderful moderator, Augusto Cabrera, Rebaza. And I'm going to hand it off to our director, William Emick, who's going to do the intro of our wonderful moderator. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Bill, I'll hand it off.
Thank you, everyone. When we started this Food for Thought series of panels in the height of the pandemic, it was a way to bring our community together. And I never imagined here we would be nearly a year later, still every week, putting together a number of really great speakers and important topics of the day. And I have to say, without insulting any of the previous presentations, including several of my own, this is the most prestigious and exciting panel we have had since our beginning. Great gratitude to Valerie and Jeremy for organizing it, along with Augusto, who is our alum. He's currently the Director General for International Relations in the Ministry of Defense of Peru. He's a career diplomat and served in many positions in foreign affairs and abroad. He has his Bachelor of Law and Political Science from the University of Lima. He has an MPA, we're very proud to say, from Colombia SIPA. And a master's degree in diplomacy and international relations from the Diplomatic Academy of Peru. He's also a professor at the University of Lima and at the Center for Higher National Studies of Peru. He is a great friend to SIPA and Colombia, an outstanding professional. We're so proud to have him as part of our family. And I will leave it to him to introduce each one of our absolutely stellar panelists. And thank you all for joining us. And I know you're going to enjoy today's session.
Thank you, Professor Remike. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a special honor to me to be the moderator for this panel discussion. Day by day, we learn more about the subsisting barriers to the participation of women in security and defense, as well as the struggle that female military members have to overcome to meet their commitment of service with their personal life as women, mothers, and partners. Based on United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, there have already been many follow-up resolutions, but there is still a lack of real coordination among states and other relevant institutions to enable more aggressive results in this matter. This prompted us to team up with key actors to share concerns, as well as best practices that help us put forward achievements in this field. So today, we have convened real champions on the matter to share their views. We are sure that their valuable insights will be very useful to help us have a better understanding, raise awareness, and build networking on this topic. With this, I would like to explain the format and rules for this panel discussion. I will briefly introduce each panelist, who in turn will share her views on the topic. After the introductory remarks, I will make a short wrap-up to start the conversation with some quick questions. Any panelist is welcome to answer at her convenience. We will also gather questions from the audience through the platform to convey them to the panelists, time allowing. At the end, each panelist will have 1 minute to make a final comment. If that sounds good, let's start with the first panelist. It is a pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Nuria Esparch. Mrs. Esparch was appointed Minister of Defense of Peru in November 2020. She is the first woman to hold this position in her country's history. She has worked both in the public and private sectors. From 2006 to 2008, she served as Vice Minister for Defense Resources in the Ministry of Defense of Peru. From 2008 to 2011, she served as Chief Executive of National Civil Service Authority, Servir. Minister Esparch also worked as a professor at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Peru and at the Institute of Governance and Public Management of the San Martín de Porres University. She is a Bachelor of Law from the Universidad Católica de Peru and holds a master's degree in public administration from the Syracuse University in Europe. She has also been a very enthusiastic organizer of this event. Welcome, Mr. Esparch. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear panelists and participants, I want to start personal. When I was young, maybe 14, I want to serve my country by joining the armed forces. So I was doing some research on how to accomplish this goal when I came across a frustrating response from a military officer. He said, "There's no room for women in the military." Today, the very same person who was rejected years ago is the first woman to become Minister of Defense in Peru history, almost 200 years after our independence. I know that the frustrating response I received at that time is something that women all over the world could equally share. For many years, unfounded biases prevailed, making it difficult to achieve our objectives. Certainly, a lot has happened since then. Women have battled to free ourselves from prejudices that have often served to hide us and prevent us from developing fully as individuals. Thanks to these efforts, we are in the process of overcoming these social and cultural barriers. Today, women hold positions of the most significant relevance in sectors where a few years ago, we had almost no place at all. In my country, a significant progress was made since Peru's armed forces admitted women for the first time in 1997. As of December 2020, almost 13% of senior and junior staff is made up of women. Some of them already have colonel rank in the Army and Air Force and captain in the Navy. Also, in keeping with UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy 2018-2028, Peru has reached a 35% of female military personnel deployed to the UN peace missions in the category of mission experts and staff officers. Likewise, in the category of contingent troops, Peru has already reached 13% out of the 15% goal set for 2028. At the moment, 37 female troops are deployed in peacekeeping operations, which positions Peru at second place in the region regarding female personnel contribution. However, we'll still have a long way to go. Last January, I met two of these troops, Army Major Ingrid Rivera and Air Force Captain Ruth Sedano. During our meeting, both shared stories of barriers that they had to overcome to become commissioned officers of their respective services. One that stood out to me was the challenges they faced when they tried to access the Special Operations course, an area where it was traditionally assumed that women could not endure the special training required. Learning from their experience, I instructed that anyone who meets the physical requirements with the operational and combat capabilities could access this course no matter their gender. Thus, no barriers would prevent the most capable people from accessing this course. During the years that I have been in the sector, I have met many military personnel who have shared stories similar to Ingrid and Ruth's. In a panel of this matter a couple of days ago, Sergeant Rosa Poza shared she and her female classmates were not given the opportunity to take conventional warfare course when she was at the Army's NCO Academy years ago. Julian Herrera, Navy lieutenant, said that when she was appointed second commander on a river gunboat, whose crew was entirely male personnel, she had to overcome the initial unease as received with. What do these stories have in common? In women participating in tasks traditionally considered for men were viewed with reluctance or hesitation. Thanks to their activities and efforts, the service members whose stories I have just shared overcome the barriers they faced. Even more, they surpassed their goals and proved everyone that military women are capable of. Our participation in these programs, previously reserved for men, represents an extraordinary opportunity to show today's girls and young women that all their aspirations are perfectly valid and possible. As of defense of her country, Mrs. Michelle Bachelet shared a few weeks ago, Institutions of society have often excluded women from various spaces only because this has become a tradition. For so many years, in areas such as the armed forces, our access was denied by the fact that it had always been a duty for men. In this context, since I began my time at the head of the Ministry of Defense, my commitment is to never say no an answer when seeking to achieve greater inclusion of women. This in no way implies lowering existing requirements. The goal is to allow everyone to compete on an equal playing field, selecting the most suitable and committed people disregarding their gender. I'm convinced that, as a society, our task is to ensure that no woman is ever told again there is no room for her in any field. Women and men should be equally committed to provide the same opportunities to fulfill their dreams and put their abilities at their country's service. In my administration, we have arranged specific actions to contribute to the achievement of this goal. We are developing an action plan and a working group to implement the UN Resolution 1325. Likewise, the Ministry has established a Gender Equality Committee. The armed services are doing the same. In addition, we are developing a protocol and a follow-up committee to prevent, investigate, and punish sexual harassment in the defense sector. We have also implemented a hotline to receive reports or complaints on this matter. Furthermore, we also established new regulations that allow pregnant cadets to continue their training after meeting certain requirements. Before, they were penalized with their removal from training centers. From my position, I am firmly committed to making sure that more girls and young women know that the military welcomes them. Here, they can fulfill professionally while contributing to our country's defense and development. I know that this goal is shared by Peru's armed forces and the United Nations. Finally, I want to emphasize the relevance of this kind of events. Through them, we can share experiences to reflect on which measures are the most effective to increase women's presence in our sectors. Never again should a girl be told that she doesn't belong. I would also wish to thank all my fellow panelists. I am sure that your knowledge will be helpful to fulfill this goal. Likewise, I want to recognize the School of Public and International Affairs of Columbia University for their active involvement. The contribution of academia is crucial in shaping society's mindset and future decision makers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. I would like to introduce now our second panelist, Mrs. Michelle Bachelet. Though she was very excited with this panel discussion, unfortunately, she was not able to connect live today, but she was kind enough to send us a video with her remarks. Mrs. Michelle Bachelet was elected President of Chile on 2 occasions, in 2006 and 2014. She was the first female President of Chile. After serving as Health Minister in 2002, she was appointed as Chile's and Latin America's first female Defense Minister. Among other relevant positions in the UN system, in 2011, she was named the first Director of UN Women. In March 2018, she was named Chair of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health. In September of that year, Mrs. Bachelet assumed her current functions as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Michelle Bachelet has a medical degree in surgery with a specialization in pediatrics and public health. She also studied military strategy at Chile's National Academy of Strategy and Policy at the Inter-American Defense College in the United States. Let's play the video.
Thanks for the invitation to share with you some opening remarks on a topic that is of great interest to me. 20 years ago, the adoption of Resolution 1325 by the United Nations Security Council represented a historic moment. It was the first formal and legal document from the Security Council that required parties to a conflict to prevent violations of women's human rights in conflict situations, to support women's participation in peace negotiations and in post-conflict reconstruction, and to protect women and girls from sexual violence in conflict. Since then, commitment by the United Nations, member states, and regional organizations to promote the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, in particular the leadership of women in preventing and responding to crises, have continued to evolve. For example, in 2019, 64 member states of the United Nations, including 8 from Latin America, made specific commitments in full support of the agenda, such as prioritizing the implementation of national action plans on women, peace, and security, like Guatemala, increasing female uniformed personnel participation in UN peace operations, like Mexico and Peru, and developing national action plans on women, peace, and security, like Ecuador and Uruguay, just to mention a few. We must also acknowledge some of the progress seen in the 20 years since the adoption of 1325. We witnessed greater inclusion of gender equality provisions in peace agreements from 14 to 22% between 1995 and 2019, and an increase in the number of women in parliaments in conflict and post-conflict countries from 13.1% in 2000 to 24.9% in 2020. However, the participation of women across all stages of peace processes remains extremely low, with 7 out of every 10 peace processes lacking women as mediators or signatories. Also, the continued killing of women human rights defenders in conflict-affected countries are a great concern, as is the large increases of the global military expenditure, unlike social security spending, which remains largely inadequate. The 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325 comes at a critical juncture, with the world facing COVID-19 and with women at the forefront of large demands for social justice happening all over the world, including Latin American countries. Today's conversation on promoting women's participation in peace and security in the Americas could not be more timely. I hope that this conversation will forge strong partnerships among all relevant stakeholders, including feminist movement and women's rights organizations. Together, we have an opportunity to build just and sustainable peace and more equal, inclusive, resilient societies. I wish you a successful meeting. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate the participation of Madame Michelle Bachelet. And allow me now to introduce our third speaker, Ms. Minister Krishnakoemarie. Mrs. Mathoera is the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Suriname, and also the first female to be appointed in this office in her country. From 2015 to July 2020, she served as a member of parliament. She had a dedicated career with the police force, where she established a proven track record in fighting organized crime for 37 years. She left the police force as a commissioner of police. In 2020 elections, she was re-elected with the greatest number of votes in the Capital District. Minister Mathoera has a master's degree in public administration from the Erasmus University Netherlands, EFR Institute Suriname, diplomas from the Suriname Police Academy, and the FBI Training Academy in the USA. She has completed training in crime prevention, drug abuse, and criminal justice in various countries. As a former lecturer, she made her contribution to the community as former chair of Art Living Suriname and is a member of Rotary Club Paramaribo. Welcome, Mrs. Mathoera. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Excellency, Mrs. Esparch, respected Mrs. Noel Vaeza, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In June 2020, I was appointed by the President of the Republic of Suriname, His Excellency Chandrika Persat Santokhi, as the Minister of Defense. It is my true pleasure to be part of this esteemed panel and to have this important discussion on promoting a broader participation of women in peace and security in the Americas. I show great appreciation towards my colleague, Minister of Defense from Peru, Mrs. Esparch, the School of Public and International Affairs of Colombia, university, and everyone involved in initiating and organizing this momentous event. Before proceeding with my speech, I would like to address all women with a message of empowerment. Women must keep demonstrating that being a woman should never be an obstacle to be successful or to do the extraordinary. Women should never let anyone discourage them with negativity and subversion. Keep your focus on your goals. Let discouragement and prejudice be an inspiration for working harder in reaching your goals. There are many inspiring women to look up to, such as the former president of Chile, Excellency Mrs. Bachelet, and my colleague Minister of Defense from Peru. Any woman in a leadership position helps to pave the way for others to follow. They have written history and left a blueprint of inspiration for generations to come. Write your own history and let your page be an inspiration to the next generations. I therefore applaud the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly for adopting various resolutions on women, peace, and security. We should also underscore that the civil society advocated persistently that women have a role and a voice that needs to be heard when it comes to peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm living my dream. I have served in law enforcement for about 38 years, served in parliament and currently in the government where I am part of the decision-making process at the top policy level. During my career in the police force, I have actively contributed to order and safety within the community. I have been a close witness of women and children being victims of violence and threats. From 1986 until 1994, there was a guerrilla war in Suriname between the Jungle Commando and the government. My late husband was a military officer, actively engaged in the war. As a wife, police officer, and member of the community, I have personally experienced the threats, fears, and dangers, which for many years had a huge impact on the physical and psychological state of people. Many villagers within the interior had to leave their homes and surroundings to seek shelter. Until this day, we as community are dealing with the negative impact of this war. And as a result, a whole generation lacked the access to education and development opportunities. A lot of the youngsters ended up committing violent crimes, joining gangs, and addicted to drugs. The damage of armed conflicts has a huge impact on the society, and therefore we have to do our utmost to prevent these situations. I have seen that in the case of Suriname, women and children were the most affected. And because of the excessive impact of armed conflict in general, and especially on women, we have to take action as an effectively operating force in achieving and sustaining peace and security. The inclusion of women in peace and security is not as apparent as it should be, but because of female leadership voicing their opinion on the importance of gender perspectives in every aspect on the political and social agenda, progress has been made. If women have the potential to contribute to peace, disarmament, and arms control issues, their government should provide them with necessary tools. So therefore, me and my government strongly support the promotion of more women in every aspect of peace and the security agenda. I believe that increasing awareness about human rights is an incredible tool. First and foremost, women are humans. Our equality should be based upon this fact. Their reproductive abilities, their role as caretakers and caregivers should never be an obstacle in fulfilling their dreams, their ambitions, and developing their talents. We have to break with this cultural barrier and should give people, a woman, more opportunities. Women should never be excluded from challenging opportunities simply based upon their gender. They should have totally freedom in deciding which role they want to fulfill in society. The second thing that I want to underscore is that safety is intertwined with freedom, which is a fundamental human right. If our safety is not guaranteed, our freedom is gone. We can see this clearly in the challenge that the whole world is facing now regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, assessing the importance of safety and freedom is essential, and women has to play an important role herein. The majority of women are involved in education and the upbringing of children. Therefore, they should strongly instill this important value and right in our children. The third one is the support of international organizations in different countries in promoting democratic principles. In autocratic regimes, women lack opportunities to raise their voices, to organize themselves, and to have decent work and living conditions. More funding for women support groups, as they can organize, share experiences, discuss the barriers they are facing, and empower each other is very essential. Setting up strong women networks. Encouraging more women to participate in political parties in order to fulfill top government positions and be able to be part of the decision-making process. 4, I underscore the fact that women are currently represented in numerous fields, for example, education, science, health, and even space. However, in numerous cases, there are still obstacles for women who have the potential to fulfill their ambitions to their full extent. It is therefore important to create as leaders possibilities for day and night care, access to jobs, housing, equal payment. These things will improve the independence of women as they can actively participate in every terrain to achieve their personal goals. 5, I think it's very important to encourage our girls and women to keep educating themselves and foster their involvement in decision-making issues and defense and security-related matters. Ladies and gentlemen, women, peace, and security in Suriname is at a progressive stage where over the past years we have made continuous efforts in addressing not only the issues regarding to the WPS agenda, but also strengthening the position of women in various institutions. With respect to the largely unappreciated, unrecognized, and undocumented role of women in peace and security, I believe that women in leading positions will make a difference for the better. In Suriname, the inclusion of women in security institutes is not a legal issue, but more a policy decision. There is no law which impedes women to have leading roles. Referring to the legal framework of the defense organization, it must be made clear that it doesn't contain any discriminatory nor restrictive measures towards female personnel. But still, women are represented in our force for 5%. Also, in previous years, women have been appointed to lead various safety and security institutes, such as Director of the National Security, the Chief of Police, the Minister of Justice and Police. In the political arena, women are represented particularly in our parliament and in the Council of Ministers. Suriname, as I mentioned, has made progress, and as part of the government, I can assure you that we will keep empowering women and promoting equality and inclusion. Every woman involved in peace and security will face numerous obstacles, but our focus should be on the primary objective, which is safety and security for ourselves, our children, and our community. We will make the necessary arrangements to have more discussions on the matter, encourage women's participation, and address their contribution to global peace and security. During my term as minister, I will keep on empowering both military and civilian women to strive for excellence. making sure that they have equal opportunities in development and equal access to leading positions, to be part of and engage in defense and security-related matters. We have already implemented a professional team dealing with all forms of harassment at the working floor. It is without a doubt that women have an impact on peace and security-related issues, stability, and sustainable development, and together with men, we will establish and maintain peace and security. I wish you all a fruitful discussion, and I'm sure that we are able to establish a network between governmental institutions, NGOs, and other relevant actors to address this very important subject on the international agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mathoera. I would like now to introduce our first panelist, Mrs. Jacqueline O'Neill. Mrs. O'Neill is Canada's Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security. She has supported the creation of national strategies and policy frameworks for more than 30 countries and international organizations. She has advised the Government of Canada on the country's action plans on women, peace and security. As president of the Institute of Inclusive Security, she supported coalitions of women leaders in many countries. She advocated for women's meaningful inclusion in peace negotiations, national political dialogues, and policymaking. She also worked at the United Nations peacekeeping missions in Sudan and Khartoum Afad University for Women. She helped found the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative to eliminate the use of children during conflict. She was also a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center Canada's Institute, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and a member of the board of directors of the Canadian International Council. She has a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Alberta and a master's in public policy from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Welcome, Ambassador O'Neill. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Director General, and thanks to our host at Columbia University. And hola, bonjour, and hello to everyone joining from around the world. I am not muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? You couldn't before? Okay. Well, I said hello to everyone. Hola and bonjour. It's a real pleasure to join you, Minister Esparch and Minister Mathoera, and to hear both of your really remarkable personal experiences, and to hear, of course, from the always wise Michelle Bachelet, and to be reunited with my dear friend Maria-Noel Vaeza. The theme of our discussion today is one that Canada cares about very deeply, and through which we have created very strong partnerships with the government of Peru, with UN Women, and increasingly across the Americas, and hopefully soon more in Suriname. And we really congratulate you, Minister, for your leadership in shaping this discussion today, and recognize in particular the unique challenges of being a country's first female Minister of Defense. And perhaps to different degrees, these are some of the same challenges that are faced by many first women in a role, and particularly in the armed forces, in that perhaps you find that sometimes you are expected to represent or speak for all women, and yet on the other hand, to be taken seriously, you can't be too associated with women or gender issues. And so I think it takes more courage and vision than many people might realize to put this issue very squarely on the agenda of the full organization, and we're so grateful that you have. And as Canadians, you know, colleagues and I come to this conversation with great pride in our own country and our very remarkable armed forces. And we also come with tremendous humility, knowing that we still face many challenges and have very much to improve. And we see ourselves with you on a journey together that we're all traveling together on. And so with that humility at the fore, let me do as perhaps the other ministers have just done and share a little bit of our experiences. I'll speak specifically to the Canadian Armed Forces, but there are very many that are similar across security services. So I'll share five insights related to our experiences. The first one is the importance of recognizing that sometimes we have needed people outside of the armed forces to prompt the changes that we now celebrate and recognize as key to our operational successes. So women have been involved in Canada's military service and our rich military history for more than 100 years, and they can now serve in any occupation in any environment. But getting there took a legal ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in 1989 after 4 women service members filed a complaint of discrimination. So we can now do that, and it's a great source of pride, but we needed an outside boost to get there. The second thing we've learned is that women are not just small men. And that is a flippant way of saying that increasing the meaningful participation of women is an issue that needs as much rigor and as much analysis as any other one that our organizations are tackling. And so, for example, we use a tool called Gender-Based Analysis Plus, and that's a process for assessing how diverse groups of people experience policies and programs. So looking at sex and gender, as well as other factors like race, religion, age, physical ability, and more. We've used it across the Canadian government for about 25 years, and we use it on operations as well as internally. So for example, recognizing, as you were referencing earlier, Minister, about needing equipment, for example, that pregnant women can wear, or even recognizing that men and women carry their weight differently. So basic equipment like boots and backpacks can be adapted for that. Otherwise, we can actually cause injuries to women over time for the course of their service. And we looked at procurement, and we saw things, for example, like the way that our fighter jets are built sometimes discouraged women from being pilots. For example, the ejection seats in our fighter jets, they only work if the pilot weighs more than about 140 pounds. That rules out about 20% of men, but about 70% of women. So we are encouraging women to go into non-traditional fields, but sometimes they're limited by factors that we never intended. The third insight that we've gained is that leadership from the top is essential, and a culture of acceptance can't be created only through directives. So there's sometimes a sense that military organizations can make all the changes they need through orders, but we have to recognize informal culture as well. And so many service women in Canada felt it was very important to not change our physical standards for women, because they said that even though their fellow soldiers would be ordered to accept and welcome them, if standards were changed, they would not be done, they would not be welcomed. The fourth thing we've learned, that what's good for women is also good for many others, including the whole organization, things like paternity policies. And fifth, and this is an area where we still struggle with many others, that we have to acknowledge that every large organization will have challenges related to sexual misconduct and harmful behaviors, and that acknowledging that is a sign of strength, not of weakness. And to wrap up, I'll just say that very briefly from our direct experiences, we know how important it is to have women in all sorts of security forces. And so we've been working very closely with UN Women on something we call the ELSI initiative, named for a Canadian woman who was our first aeronautical engineer. And the goal of that is to increase the participation of women in uniformed peace operations. And I'll say only briefly, we have one really key tool that I think is very powerful. It assesses barriers for women's advancement and identifies 10 main areas of barriers, from pre-deployment to deployment, as well as cross-cutting issues like gender stereotypes. We've developed with partners a methodology for assessing those barriers. And Canada, for example, is just started and is undergoing the process ourselves. We're in the midst of it. Mexico is one of the most recent countries to adopt it, and will undertake it as well. And we look forward to doing so with many other countries, because just as you've each spoken about, there's so much more scope to create networks and actually learn from each other. And that's the spirit in which we're trying to advance through the ELSI initiative, both at home and with partners around the world. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Last but not least, we'd like to introduce our first panelist, Mrs. Maria-Noel Vaeza. Mrs. Vaeza has been the UN Women Regional Director for the Americas and the Caribbean since July 2019. She has previously worked as a Director of Program Division at the UN Women Headquarters in Europe. She joined the UN Women from UNOPS Headquarters in Copenhagen. when she was responsible for the operational results of global portfolios and for the establishment of UNOPS strategic partnership. She previously served as the regional director of UNOPS for Latin America and the Caribbean. Prior to joining the UN, Mrs. Vaeza held multiple positions in Uruguay's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She was also the alternative representative of Uruguay to the World Bank Board of Directors. Mrs. Vaeza holds a doctorate in law and social science from the University of the Republic of Uruguay and a master's degree in international public policy from Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Mrs. Vaeza. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Augusto, very much. It's an honor for me to be with two wonderful women that are ministers of defense. I think this was not possible some years ago. So it means that we are making progress, and we're making progress. And as you can see, when there is political will, there is change for women. So I'm very, very glad to have heard Madam Minister of Defense of Peru and Madam Minister of Defense of the Republic of Suriname. Thank you so much for all what you're doing for women. Also, for me, it's an honor to be in the same panel with Michelle Bachelet, our UNHCR Human Rights High Commissioner. She's known for the fight for gender equality. Since the creation of UN Women, she was our first executive director. And as well, Jacqueline O'Neill, it's a pleasure to be with you again. And I know how hard you're fighting for women, peace, and security. And I'm very, very happy to be sharing all this with SIPA, Columbia University, that is so prestigious, and follow up these issues very, very closely. So thank you so much. Let me say that indeed it's very timely, this panel, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the landmark UN Security Council resolution number 1325, which first recognizes the unique experience of women in conflict and acknowledge the vital role of women's contribution in conflict prevention, conflict resolution, peacekeeping, peace building, and in all aspects of crisis prevention and response. We certainly discussed today how truly inclusive and effective peace and security must also design and implement policies to include women, with women and women at all levels. Only in this way, will full inclusion and participation of women, all people living in our countries and regions, will benefit equally from peace dividends and for sustainable stability and development. It is therefore particularly relevant that we are having these discussions with two women defense minister and one ambassador of women peace and
All right, I think we have some problems with connection of Mrs. Vaeza, but we're gonna give some moments to try her reconnect again.
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Maria-Noel.
Now, I'm so sorry, the connection is not good.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? All right, thank you so much, and I'm sorry about this. The COVID pandemic has tested our ability to respond to crisis as a global community and has made clear how women, despite the global spike in violence against them, have been at the forefront of response in the health sector, in the service provision, in the food security, in policy making and community response. The crisis has worsened socioeconomic conditions for women, disproportionately affecting them. Also, at the same time, patriarchal, discriminatory, and violent culture patterns against women remain in place, with gender stereotypes persisting in the education system, the media, and political and cultural institutions. The security sector we saw is not an exception. but we are making progress. Women make up only a small minority in Latin America armed forces and security sector. Part of this because armed forces in the region only become enlisted in the 90s, as we heard. But allow me to name a few advances that are so important and are sort of a beacon of how we are improving. 7 countries in Latin America have already adopted national security plans for women, peace, and security, including Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil, El Salvador, Guatemala, and most recently, Mexico. Some others, like Uruguay, are at the last stages of the preparation. Over the last 2 decades, a growing number of countries have increased the percentage of women in their armed forces. And we heard already in Mexico, 12%, Uruguay, 11%, Peru, 10%, Colombia, 9%, Brazil, 7.6%, etc. So similarly, some countries have taken clear steps to increase women's participation in the UN peace operations. And let me tell you, when we did a workshop of women in peace operations, we could see the importance of women to approach the rebels, for example, in Goma, in DRC. The contingency led by women were the one who could understand better what things were happening and how they can present services to the population. There is a way to reaching out that is perhaps more efficient and more effective, with empathy and a lot of contribution that women can do when they are in the armed forces. Most recently, as the ambassador said, the ELSI initiative, with the generosity of the government of Canada, was launched, and countries like Ecuador and Mexico are accelerating the participation of uniformed women in peace operations. It's very important to say that there are some gender units that are being created in the defense ministry. We already heard the 2 ministers of defense. So other ministries are gradually introducing content related to gender and women's rights in their training programs. And we, of course, are supporting from UN Women. It is crucial that we considerably increase our effort and our political will. Despite the advances, women participation in the security sector remain slow. So we need to wrap it up and put this political will behind, as we heard today. Uniformed women see promotion opportunity within their institutions. They are limited by several barriers. And one of the barriers is the care. There are not systems of care in our region, and it's very difficult for women to allow to leave their children, their disabled or their elderly in the hands of people that they don't trust. So it is important that we understand that the lack of time of women and the co-responsibility of men in the economy of care is also critical. If, as humanity, we want to resolve the pressing threats of the current area we're going through with this pandemic, growing inequalities and polarization for the climate crisis, we need more than ever to consolidate the leadership of women. The security sector remains a critical ally in these regards, and we hope that Latin America will be a beacon of hope and we show the way. Let me mention some of the specific actions that security forces can implement to expedite the implementation of women, peace, and security agenda. For example, developing security policies with a gender perspective, supporting quotas, developing, strengthening gender-responsive protocols and guidelines, preventing proliferation and trafficking of small arms and light weapons. Faced with the extraordinary challenges of our time, we must also respond in an extraordinary way. A radical shift and tangible results in women's equal and meaningful participation in peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building is possible in our times. So we have to continue pushing. We must work relentlessly to make sure that the security sector, including our forces, police, defense ministers, and all other relevant institutions, operate in a gender-responsive manner invariable, incorporating women's reality and women's perspectives on peace and security. It is essential to guarantee the rights of women in uniform and those who they mean to serve and protect. Let us remember that Women, Peace and Security agenda is not about making conflict safer for women and girls. It is intrinsically about preventing conflict and building peaceful, resilient, and equitable societies for all. UN Women stands ready to support and accompany all governments, civil society, and partners in this respect. Let me invite you all next Monday to the Generation Equality Forum that will begin in Mexico and finalize in France, which is an opportunity to discuss priorities about a global compact to promote initiatives on the broad framework of our common commitments on women, peace, security, and humanitarian action. Thank you so much for the invitation and have a nice day.
Thank you, Maria-Noel. We have heard very interesting and valuable insights from our distinguished panelists. High Commissioner Bachelet and Director General Vaeza have remarked very valuable views on the status of the advancement of women in peace and security in the region. Minister Esparch and Mathoera have shared their unique and personal stories and challenges, coming along with the circumstances of being the first female defense ministers in their countries, as well as the barriers that they have to encounter yet. In turn, Ambassador O'Neill has shared a holistic approach to the matter and has identified subsisting issues that are yet to be tackled on this topic. With this, I would like to ask the panelists one question to kick off the exchange. Any panelist is welcome to answer at her convenience. This is about the participation of male officers and male actors in the process. What would you say should be the role they will have to play? How could we include male actors as key partners in this? Anyone can raise their hand. Mr. Mathoera.
Well, maybe I can say one word. Men are fundamental for women to reach gender equality, but men needs to understand as well that it's a matter of power. So there is a power struggle because there's a limited positions in the army, in the government, but it is, as the Minister of Peru said, the one that gets better, that has the merits, has the one that needs to be given the opportunity. The problem is that women has not been given the opportunity so far. So we need to push it. And I like quotas, but I like more parity. So it is important, this political will. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Minister Mathoera also wanted to have some comment on this.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's very important to involve male officers in the WPS agenda. I think the majority of officers, instructors in our defense organizations in the whole field of security are male. And I think it's very important that they have to understand that women can't be excluded and that they have to take into account what the ambassador of Canada had mentioned, that the simple things like the possibilities to accommodate women within the defense organization, all the small things that they should also be aware of that. And I think defense organizations and security organizations are hierarchic organizations, and we should involve them, make them aware, and very much, because otherwise we should not implement or promote more women in security organization. I think it's very important because we have to prevent that women should be part of the decision-making process, and that we can prevent conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So I'd like now to ask a question about the barriers what are the most common barriers women encounter when trying to reach high-level positions, both in the public and private sectors? Would you see any difference? Perhaps Ambassador O'Neill?
Sure, thanks. So a number of barriers, and maybe I'll pick up also on the point related to men and answer them together. I think exactly as the minister said and Maria-Noel said, men are essential partners in this journey. And I think we only get there when we have male colleagues who assume it with the same level of interest and passion as they would any other issue. And part of doing that is having senior leaders, including senior male leaders, talk about why this is important to the organization. And I have I'm always concerned that women are having to justify what additional things they bring to the job. So they can do the basic job and they're able to engage with populations and they can do X, Y, Z. But there's also a real argument for the fact that diverse organizations make better decisions, that an organization that better reflects the community is going to be more supported by that community. So until our male colleagues start making these cases, then we will not actually have the mental acceptance about why it's not only good for the women to be involved, but it's important for the organization. And one venue that I find very interesting is there's now a network of chiefs of defense staff supported through the UN on women, peace, and security. And there's only one woman chief of defense staff in the world from Slovenia. But there are now, Canada's chairing it this year. We're turning it next to Bangladesh. But there are now 54, so 53 male chiefs of the defense staff talking about women, peace, and security, sharing experiences and lessons, and talking about why it's important to them organizationally to have women engaged. So certainly one of the barriers that we hear very often are attitudes of other colleagues, either from thinking that female colleagues can't do the job, or even thinking that they need to be protected when they're on the job, so they're not sent on the riskiest patrols, for example, or things like that. So there's a whole spectrum of attitudinal challenges that people face that also end up limiting women themselves.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are receiving some questions. We're trying to summarize them and also be mindful of the time. So we have a question about how would you envision the status of this topic in 5 or 10 years from now? Perhaps Maria-Noel, Vaeza, the question is about how would you envision the status of this topic in 5 or 10 years from now? Or anyone? Yes. I'll let you repeat the question.
In 5 years.
How would you envision the status of this topic in 5 or 10 years from now?
In 5 or 10 years, I envision more Nurias and more ministers like the Minister of Defense of Suriname. I wish we have 15 ministers of defense. This is critical. When we reach parity, I think there men will realize that we are so effective in war zones, but more effective in preventing. So that's why our role is critical to prevent war. Thanks.
Maybe,
Minister Esparch?
maybe I can say something about this. I think that, I hope actually, that the best news in the future is that being a woman in a key position is not news. This is my best hope in the future, that being a woman is not a surprise for anyone in this kind of roles.
Thank you both. So we have a question. From your experience, what piece of advice would you give female and male students watching this panel today? Mr. Esparch?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is to students watching this panel is that they should never take a no for an answer. This is a key thing, I think, and this is the best advice I received from President Bachelet when we talk. As said before, sometimes change is not supported only because tradition rather than real reasons. And this resistance to change is many times frustrating and can make achieving our dreams more difficult. And it's key to let frustrating episodes bring us down, but to work so that rejection is no longer an option. I want you to be sure that with preparation, dedication, with effort, it is possible to change the world. It is possible to change the world and making it a place where our gender is no longer a relevant factor to determine whether we accomplish or not our goals. And I would also like to highlight the relevance of your education to the networks and knowledge acquired through education have been essential in breaking many of the glass ceilings that women face daily. I encourage all students, especially women, to never stop learning and having new experiences. This accompanied by your resolve to overcome these existing barriers and biases will give you the tools to achieve all your goals.
Thank you, Minister. We are time constrained and we're going to start finishing. Perhaps this is going to be the last question. To Mr. Mathoera, I'm going to ask the fifth question, and perhaps you can also keep it in mind so you perhaps want to answer this one too. Among the measures taken for a broader participation of women in peace and security, would you signal some aspects of these measures that might have the potential to backfire the process? Mr. Mathoera.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding to the previous question, I think I will give an advice for all the students to develop a strong will and to work hard, to have discipline and make themselves competent. And I think of the legacy that they want to let behind, because it is possible. Don't let anyone discourage you for having a very successful career within the security and peace and security field. And the second, the signal of things that can backfire. I think willingness and from within the security organizations as well, lack of information, but also political will. I think it's very important to have political will on the top level to improve or increase amount of women within the organizations and involve women within the decision-making process. I think these are things that can backfire, and that's why we have to promote and create more awareness and encourage governments to have a very strong policy in this field.
Thank you, Minister. I think we have reached the time for the panel. It's been a wonderful panel, very rich with thoughts and ideas and proposals and dreams about the topic. And we are very happy to have had a very large audience. I've been told that this is the largest audience that we have had in this kind of format in the Food for Thoughts organized by Columbia SIPA Speaker Center. My special thanks to them, Professor Emike, Valerie, Jeremy, all the staff in the Ministry of Defense, Miguel, and all the people from press. My special thanks to everyone and all the attendees. And I wish you a very good day. Thank you.